Well, I first bought Oliver probably 5 or 6 years ago, to be honest. Might even be a little bit longer. Um, More to see if he could cope with football at the time. With football, it's a tricky thing to do, isn't it? Because you with the noises and the crowd sizes. Yeah, out there, it was out there. You're right. But it was a fact of trying to look somewhere that had a good atmosphere. Well, it wasn't too overpowering for him. So that was the first reason we chose to come here, and it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and that was when it was just Oliver that was coming as well. I think the football club's always trying to look forward to what they can do to improve, especially when you get to kids with sensory needs and disability. I think as a whole, football is moving forwards, but still has a long way to go. The club, we have made contact with the club on numerous occasions, and it's always been well received. It's whether the solution's always there. It's not always that straightforward, and we understand that as fans as well, because it's not always a quick fix. But on the whole, it's been good, yeah. I think for Rother and for me, we chose very early where to sit. I mean, Oliver's obviously got two younger brothers who've also got disabilities and SEN needs, and we tend to sit in the corner flag because it's by Miller Bear and the drum, and it gives them a quieter area that's slightly out of the stand. Yeah, I mean, the first time we came to the very first one this season. I know there's been ones in previous seasons, but this season, I'm not going to say it wasn't thought of, but I think it was underestimated how popular it would be. And then when we arrived, it was just far too busy for Oliver at the start. So we, to be honest, we stepped away and just came down to the club shop for a bit. But then we did take him back up at the end when it was quieter. But having spoken to the people who arranged it, they made a provision for the second one to say, like, right, we'll get people who've got these needs in either individually before or at the end, and make sure it's a lot more tailored to their requirements. It's very easy to oversee that kind of stuff and not think about it, but sometimes for a child like Oliver, his brothers, standing in a queue around people who are loud and busy, it can be very difficult for them. But the club definitely took that on board. I don't know, to be honest. Oliver just seemed to like mascots. That was the first thing. And then when we went to, just before we went to Wembley, it was the Papa John's final that we went for, I bought Oliver just a bear onesie that wasn't like his costume now. It was just a onesie with a hood on it. And he just wore it to one game, and loads of kids came up to him and said, "Oh, where's he got his bear costume from? Where have you got that?" And I was like, well, I've just bought it just to try it with him. But Oliver just absolutely loves mascots, and Miller Bear, once he started seeing Miller Bear, that was it. Then he just wanted to be Miller Bear. So, I mean, at the end of the game, when we come out, it's difficult during a game or after a game, because obviously there's a large crowd that's applauding or not applauding, depending on the situation at times. But after the game, Oliver, a lot of times will not want to leave straight away, because we've got disability parking on the car park. But literally when we wait, there's numerous players who I could speak of individually who, if the kids are actually sat in our van just waiting for them, will literally come over to the van and stick their head in the van and talk to them and ask if they're all right and ask if they've enjoyed their game. Obviously he has favourites, as any child does, but he absolutely loves every one of them, and every one of them will give him the time. They don't ignore him or walk past. They'll all stop. They'll all ask if he's enjoyed the game. They'll all ask how his week's been. And that's the kind of thing that you don't get in many places, especially in sport. It's I don't know, it just feels like they want to give him their time. It doesn't feel like they have to. It feels like they actually want to see them, and there's a couple that it's been more and more every game, which Oliver will then like to bring presents for them, and then we have to wait for them to see them, whether we want to wait and it's cold and it's raining or not, he'll want to wait and see them. So it's been really nice developing that this season. I think it's just the opportunity where we can come somewhere that's relatively secure, where the kids are kind of, I don't know, it's just a safe space in one way. There's not many places when you've got 3 children, of which 2 require buggies or wheelchairs, and then you've got Oliver who has a lot of needs as well, who is often in a buggy as well. To have that kind of environment where you know they're safe and they can all do something together, and other people will interact with them, and will just, even as simple as like a high five or a fist bump from the security teams and from the community trust, it goes a massively long way with them. They absolutely love that. Sometimes that becomes more important than the game, waiting for someone to just pop their head past the railings and say hello to them. So I think that's what makes it a great place for them to come to be honest. I think it's a very difficult thing for football clubs, because whether a child or an adult has a disability or an SEN need or not, every single person that sets foot in this club has different needs. We kind of see it a lot more than others, because the football experience is predominantly tailored to people, and it can be managed. But I think having someone you can talk to about the individual things you really need, that to us seem so simple, but to others they've not ignored, they've just not realised there was such a simple fix or such an easy thing they could do to add in. I think those roles are imperative, and it's nice to see that not just within Rotherham, within other clubs and stuff that Rotherham share about other clubs about how to develop things with inclusivity, and also other sports. It's nice to see it's now being thought of, because before I had children with SEN needs or disabilities, I would have overlooked it. I'm not saying people aren't looking at things that they should be. I wouldn't have necessarily picked up on these things as myself. So I think those roles where people are receptive to it are really important. I think it's very easy to think they're not important if you don't understand the relevance to yourself. Football is a game that we talk about being inclusive. It should be inclusive on all levels, whether the growth in women's football or disability football, or whichever way you want to look at it, everyone should be entitled to come to football and enjoy it. These organisations, that's what they strive for. They're not looking for anything to be massively different. They just want everyone to feel that they can come. They're not being stared at, they're not being looked at, the provision's there for them. And they can just come and enjoy it safely and be happy watching a game. That's what it's all about. To just try and, for me, on a personal side with my boys, it's a case of we don't look at our boys as having disabilities. We see them as anyone would see their children. We don't see 3 children with disabilities. I know I mention it a lot, but that's to try and drive awareness for other people. For us, they're just our kids, and they should have the same provision and the same opportunity that everyone else has. Their disability shouldn't hold them back. We know in some ways it will, but if organisations are there and they want to try and improve that and help them do that and not have to worry about it, then that can only be a good thing for me. I think the best thing I can say is to contact the club probably in advance and just ask to speak to someone. It can be overwhelming, but there's a lot of things in place at Rotherham. There's a disability supporters club that has a room available before games where you can actually go and experience that and talk to people with similar disabilities. But the key thing I'd say is until you try it, you don't know how your child or the individual will react. I mean, the first time I bought Oliver, I was willing that if I bought him and within 4 minutes I needed to leave, I'd leave. It was that simple. But until you try something, you're not sure how that'll cope. Have the things that you'd have in place for other things. I mean, when Oliver first started coming, he used to have ear defenders. So a lot of the time he'd need them because he'd be fine most of the time. But actually something as simple as Rotherham scoring would be too much for him because the noise would be too loud, and then that would leave him upset and crying, when actually when he got home all we'd do is watch it on the telly and he'd be jumping up and down celebrating the goal. So it's just tailoring it to your own needs and not being scared to try it. If you come and try and it don't work, then just leave and then speak to the club and say, what can we do better next time? But I think if you don't try it, you won't know. That's the only advice I could give, really.